And New York is the home of the 2019 NBA Draft, and that is exactly how the board will look inside of the Barclays Center before the commissioner takes the stage. Welcome inside our studios, Maria Taylor alongside Adrian Wojnarowski. He's our senior NBA insider, and you've certainly already been busy, Woj. I know there's only been one weekend, but you're working hard, and we'll keep them working here during our mock draft special. We also have to keep our GMs working hard. Now, they are operating as if they are running the front office, okay? So we can get down and dirty on whether or not we like their picks, but they are not assuming what team will pick what. They are the GMs, and they each have one trade in their back pocket. So if they choose to, they can trade and adjust our draft board. All right, one of the biggest bombs that Woj has obviously dropped already this offseason was between the Lakers and the Pelicans. It was a trade that sent Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, Josh Hart, and 3 first-round picks to New Orleans, while obviously AD, Anthony Davis, the guy had basically been saying that he didn't want to play for the Pelicans anymore since January, gets out and makes his way to the Lakers to play with his buddy LeBron. And Woj, you were the one who ultimately broke the story, but I feel as though the ripple effects of this trade are going to run throughout the league. So what is your take on some of the effects that could happen?
Well, it has changed the league because you have a Laker team now that is in the mode of trying to create more cap space. They may look to get off more contracts. And you have New Orleans really with control of the top part of this draft because they have number 1 and they have number 4, and they've had that 4th overall pick at auction all week long.
Mm-hmm. And what does that change ultimately for the Pelicans? I mean, what are they able to get with their David Griffin now in charge and the adjustments that they're making ultimately with that franchise? It's not rebuild, it seems like. I mean, they're being able to do a little bit of a reload right now.
Yeah, and that's because of the arrival of Zion. He gives them the ability to not try to tear this thing down and go young with draft picks and stripping salary. Mm-hmm. They're going right back in and trying to get into the playoffs with Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, Drew Holiday, who's an outstanding player back, and they're trying to turn that 4th overall pick and maybe more picks from the Lakers in that deal into an all-star player if they can find one available in the marketplace.
All right, you hear that sound? You'll be hearing it all night long. That means that the Pelicans are on the clock. Bobby Marks, he is going to have our very first pick. Remember, operating as the GM, I don't think it's going to take him that long to figure out exactly who he does want to draft for the Pelicans.
No, Maria, it is not going to take very long, and New Orleans will select the new face of the franchise, Zion Williamson from Duke. And I think when you look at Williamson, a 6'6", power forward that can play multiple positions here, especially in this day and age where he can occasionally play small ball 5. Probably the best draft prospect that we have seen since maybe his former teammate, could have been former teammate, Anthony Davis, who's now been traded to Los Angeles. And I think, Mike, when we look at Zion Williamson right now and the addition of Lonzo Ball from the Lakers, what's the impact that you see that Ball will have on him right now?
I think it's going to be huge. In transition, you can imagine those guys getting out in the open court, Lonzo Ball to Zion Williamson lobs. They can play fast, they can play aggressively, they can switch everything defensively. And what I love about Zion is just the fact that he's a thankless superstar. Woj touched on potentially trying to add an all-star caliber player. Zion is an easy guy to play with. He does all the little things. He's willing to fly around defensively. He's a monster rebounder, plays as hard as any number 1 pick I can remember.
All right, Mike, well, just to review some of the accolades for Zion, he's just the 3rd freshman to win the Wooden Award. Remember, KD accomplished that. And, of course, AD, Anthony Davis. He also shot the ball 68% during his 1 season at Duke. And that was the best by any freshman in Division I history. So, like Mike said, he is certainly easy to play with. And you're talking about a franchise guy, someone that you can build around. And you kind of mentioned it a little bit, too. The pieces that come over from the Lakers will allow David Griffin that opportunity.
Yeah, and they really like the pairing of Lonzo Ball and Zion Williamson in the open floor. New Orleans picked up the team option on the 2021-22 year on Coach Alvin Gentry's contract. David Griffin really sees his style of play fitting with the group they have. And what they know with Zion and what everybody knew was not just a franchise talent, but a franchise person, the kind of guy you want to build the whole organization around character-wise. And that for the Pelicans is another reason to keep trying to bring in guys to win right now. They know that he has the maturity to handle everything that's going to come at him here.
I would certainly agree with that. You talk to Zion, and he's one of those guys that is mature because of his mom and, of course, his stepfather. All right, we have another pick in, the Memphis Grizzlies, in at number 2. Mike Schmitz, you are able to make the pick this time.
So another no-brainer here. I'm going with Ja Morant of Murray State. He has as much upside as any prospect in this draft not named Zion Williamson, his former AAU teammate. He's a freak athlete. He's impossible to keep in front. He's tremendous in the open court. And, you know, Mike Conley on the wrong side of 31, his days might be numbered in Memphis. So you're looking at the heir apparent of Mike Conley here and a guy who's going to fit perfectly with Jaren Jackson Jr. I think that could be one of the best point guard big man combinations in the entire league within the next 5 years. Jaren Jackson can space it out to 3. He's a lob threat. He can switch ball screens and protect the rim. So I love that fit there in Memphis.
All right. I love the fit too. Ja Morant led the nation in assists in his time, but we also have seen him be a little bit of a leaper, a little bit smaller. Maybe some people are attacking his size, but still a playmaker at the point guard position. So where does that lead Memphis and Mike Conley?
Well, it leaves Memphis very much in the market to trade him. And possibly before Thursday night's draft or at the draft Thursday night, they discussed trade scenarios at the February trade deadline along with Marc Gasol. They moved Gasol to Toronto. They held back on Conley, but getting that number 2 overall pick gives them the freedom now to move on Conley. He's got 2 years left at over $60 million. He is in great demand. There are a lot of teams who would love to get at him, and they probably will be able to get 2 first-round picks for Conley. And I think having this pairing of Morant and Jaren Jackson could speed up that Grizzlies rebuild.
Yeah, right now for the Grizzlies, their lone pick in the draft is this number 2 pick. But also Jaren Jackson Jr., you mentioned him, another guy that they can build around. All right, the Knicks pick is in. Everyone's waiting here in New York, Bobby Marks, to find out who you're going with.
Well, Marie, it's going to be the player that we had projected as the number 1 pick before the college basketball season even started, and that's R.J. Barrett from Duke. And what New York gets now is an 18-year-old wing, 6'7", 210 pounds, probably arguably the best player on this Knick roster right now after he's drafted. And the one weakness, if we are going to kind of pick apart his game, is his three-point shooting and is from the line, a 67% free throw shooter. But it's R.J. Barrett at number 3, and he should be a foundation piece going forward.
All right, R.J. Barrett, certainly a playmaker, broke Duke and the ACC's freshman scoring records, obviously able to score the ball with or without Zion on the floor because he did have to play without him for a while. But the big question, I think, Woj, that everyone asks about New York, free agency. I mean, what's happening there? What are the big pieces that can be plugged in and played with in New York?
Well, their free agent landscape changed dramatically when Kevin Durant tore his Achilles, and that was their target. And the Knicks' plan is the same as the Brooklyn Nets' plan, to try to bring Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving together. And right now, with Durant out for the season, he could still sign with the Knicks, but next year he would essentially be a $38 million redshirt player in New York. And if the Knicks aren't able to get Irving, Durant, it leaves them in a really difficult position. They do not want to go chase one of those B-list stars, a Jimmy Butler, a DeMarcus Cousins. That hasn't been their plan. I think they'd go back into free agency again next year and then try to build with, around R.J. Barrett, whoever they take at 3. But this is a difficult scenario for the Knicks with Durant's injury.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in the city right now that they were obviously wishing to get that number 1 overall pick. Didn't work, and so a lot of people saying that R.J. Barrett could end up playing in New York. Now, just to recap a little bit, the Lakers and Pelicans trade that sent Anthony Davis out to play with LeBron. We talked about those 3 first-round picks that the Pelicans received. They get the future picks, including the 2021 pick that will go to New Orleans if it is in the top 8 of that year's draft and will become an unprotected pick in 2022 if it isn't. In addition, the deal includes a pick swap in 2023, which is unprotected, as well as an unprotected first-round pick in 2024 that the Pelicans will have the right to defer until 2025. So they have plenty of assets right now in the draft, and they have the number 4 overall pick. Mike Schmitz, who are you going with?
So you saw the additions, right? You saw Lonzo Ball, you saw Josh Hart, Brandon Ingram, and Drew Holiday as well on the perimeter. But to me, it does not matter. I'm drafting the best talent, and the best prospect on the board is Darius Garland. This is a guy who we had as the #1 point guard on our board coming into the season before the emergence of Ja Morant. And just looking at the point guards that are having success in today's NBA, whether it's a Steph Curry or a Kyrie Irving or a Damian Lillard, it's guys who can shoot it off the dribble with range at a pick and roll. That's what Darius Garland does. And the fact that he can shoot it off the catch allows him to fit with those other guards in multi-guard lineups. So he has the highest upside. And, you know, with New Orleans potentially looking for that all-star caliber player, he could be an asset as well to potentially moving forward.
All right, so remember, when we're talking about Darius Garland, you might think to yourself, oh, I haven't heard of him that much before. That is because he was only able to play 5 games at Vanderbilt due to a torn meniscus in his knee. So that's why you haven't heard of him. But obviously coming into the season, this was a guy that a lot of people had pegged as a playmaking guard that could play 2 different positions. We've seen him a little bit in those first 5 games. He hit step backs. He's really agile and he can move. So in addition of another guard, maybe, according to Mike Schmitz, for the Pelicans could be a good move.
Yeah, and a player who, once he went down, his team, Vanderbilt, went 0-18. Yeah. In the SEC, but the chance to get at Darius Garland at #4 is part of the reason that pick has so much value for the Pelicans right now. They're out in the marketplace. There's really 3 scenarios. They're trying to either get a really good veteran player, perhaps an all-star, using 4 as the key to that deal. They have other Laker picks, even the players from the Lakers deal. They could stay there and make the pick, or they could move down. There are plenty of teams who've been knocking on the door at 4. They could get multiple first-round picks in the future and expand that Lakers deal, make it worth 5, 6 first-round picks. So David Griffin has a lot of options leading into Thursday night.
David Griffin, he's had a lot of options since taking over for the Pelicans. Okay, the pick is in. Cleveland Cavaliers, we got Bobby Marks, our GM, making a decision.
Marie, I'm going to go 2 for 2. I'm going to take the best available player in this draft and also a position of need, and that's Jarrett Culver from Texas Tech. And when I look at Culver's size, 6'6", 200 pounds, the perfect fit to play along Colin Sexton, their lottery pick from last year. And with Jordan Clarkson on an expiring contract, Culver will likely be your starting 2 guard for the foreseeable future here.
So Jarrett Culver, he's a guy that you watched Texas Tech help them get to a national championship game, obviously falling in that matchup, but from the hometown of Lubbock, Texas, kind of a guy who was off the radar, became on the radar, known a little bit more for his defense in his sophomore season and all of the improvements that he made there. And Cleveland, obviously, with a brand new coach coming from the college ranks, could have a lot of success building with young players, especially who were most recently in college.
Yeah, and Cleveland could still end up with more picks in this draft. They have that J.R. Smith contract that they could use. It's got a partial guarantee. They could take on someone else's bad contract and get another draft pick with it. What they would love to do with John Beilein here is to start getting as many young guys in as they can to allow Beilein to start teaching his system. And, Kevin Love at some point, it'll be interesting to see if he's going to be part of this long-term rebuild there. He's got a lot of money coming to him moving forward. They've not had any conversations about him. But it's by some point next season, you could see his name start to appear in trade talks too.
All right, well, Jarrett Culver going to the Cleveland Cavaliers, according to Bobby Marks, and obviously they already have Colin Sexton there for John Beilein to work with and see if he fits in the system. So far, in our mock draft system, we've got our top 5 picks in. I don't really have any arguments there, Woj, but obviously they didn't get any approval from us on this. They were making their own decisions the entire time.
These guys better be getting ownership approval, or they may get yanked right off the set here.
We're going to work on that next time. We got plenty more picks to make in our 2019 NBA mock draft, and make sure we fill out our entire board. Okay, we've made it through our top 5 picks in our 2019 NBA mock draft, and next up are the Phoenix Suns sitting with the 6th pick. And Mike Schmitz, it's your job to tell us who you're going with.
Well, the Suns are in dire need of a point guard. The best point guard on the board is North Carolina's Kobe White. Had a stellar freshman season, averaging over 16 points a game in under 30 minutes. Played at a frenetic pace. He can really get up and down in transition. He can shoot it in a variety of ways. And I really like his fit alongside Devin Booker because he can play on the ball. He can play off the ball. He's a little bit more wired to score, so he needs to improve as a facilitator. But being able to play off of guys like Booker, DeAndre Ayton, Mikal Bridges. That's a pretty strong young nucleus there in Phoenix.
Well, you talked about him loving transition, Mike. 30% of his offense came in the open court, so he obviously wants to put a ton of pressure on the rim. And I remember talking to Roy Williams about this guy. He said it's one of the best point guards he's ever coached, and that's saying a lot when you are at UNC and you've been the head coach there for as long as he has. But let's talk about the Phoenix Suns. We know Devin Booker's there. We know they have elite scoring. DeAndre Ayton has come along well. What are the needs for the Suns?
Well, they've got to get some more maturity on that roster. I think they'd like to go out in free agency and get some veterans who can complement some of the really good young players they have. Two players who they've made very available in trade talks in recent days. Josh Jackson, the number 4 overall pick from a couple years ago, and TJ Warren, who averaged nearly 20 points a game for them. Both are available, and they've talked with multiple teams about them. I wouldn't be surprised if both are moved by the time we get to Thursday's draft.
Yeah, it's one of those teams that only 19 wins last season, so obviously a lot to improve upon here in this draft. Chicago Bulls, the pick is in. Bobby Marks, who would you go with?
Maria, I'm looking at one of the older players in this lottery, and old when I mean 21 years old, and that's DeAndre Hunter from Virginia. 6'8", probably the best defender in the draft here, and played for a winning program coming off a national championship. And I look at Hunter for a Chicago team that's looking to kind of accelerate this rebuild, a player that can come in right now, give you some depth coming off the bench, and a player that can guard multiple positions.
DeAndre Hunter, the ACC Defensive Player of the Year, shot nearly 44% from 3 this season. Let's talk about how to accelerate the rebuild, Woj. That's what we just heard Bobby say. So how do they go about doing that?
Maria, this is a team that really could make a jump at the East next year. They get a point guard, and there's some options. They can do it here in the draft. Patrick Beverly, who's a Chicago native with the Clippers, will be a free agent. That's a player like several others who they've targeted. A player like Malcolm Brogdon, who's a restricted free agent in Milwaukee. Milwaukee's got a lot of money committed going forward. Could a team like Chicago put out a big offer sheet that maybe is difficult for Milwaukee financially to match? They've got some options, but they have a core group here that with the right move or two in this summer in this draft, I think they could be in playoff contention next season.
Yeah, Zach LaVine. They've got Wendell Carter, who they got in last year's draft. Lauri Markkanen, who's played well. 22 wins for the Bulls last season. The Hawks, again, I feel like we keep saying them. Atlanta, their pick is in. Who are you going with, Mike Schmitz?
Well, with Taurean Prince now gone, I think this team is looking for a wing shooter who can defend a few positions. My guy here is Cam Reddish. He was a bit of an enigma this past season. Really didn't have a great year. 13 points per game, under 40% from 2, streaky from 3, but a big-time talent, 6'8", 7-foot wingspan. Really exactly what you look for in a prototype wing. And I think going to a low-pressure situation where he can play off of Trae Young, play off of John Collins, get up and down, shoot threes is going to be an ideal fit for him.
Cam Reddish, a little bit of an enigma at Duke. Sometimes it seemed as though he faded or maybe deferred to Zion and RJ, but obviously a very high potential there. I feel like we keep saying the Hawks. We are going to keep saying the Hawks because this is the first of 3 picks that they have, Woj, in the first round. They have 6 of the top 45 picks.
Yeah, 8, 10, and 17, and they really don't want to choose both 8 and 10. Either they're going to move up or they're going to move out and get more picks, but they have a lot of options here to either target a player up high or kind of keep spinning it forward with more picks. But I think their plan is to not end up on draft night choosing at both 8 and 10.
Well, you got to like the way the Hawks kind of towards the end of the season looked like they started to uptick. Trae Young played really well after the All-Star break. Take a look at our top 8 picks. So far, our team front office, which is Mike Schmitz and Bobby Mark, they've been put to work, and they're doing pretty good, but we still have to make our way all the way to 30. The number 9 overall pick, the Washington Wizards. They're up next. And Bobby, you heard the noise. Go ahead and make your pick.
Maria, it's going to be the best athlete in the draft, and that's Sekou Doumbouya from France, a 6'9", 210-pound small forward, power forward, athlete, can get up and down. And when I look at Doumbouya, a little bit of a project for a Washington team that, remember, still does not have a general manager in place, but is in that rebuild, retooling phase right now. And Mike, when I look at him, is he a player that you can see possibly sliding into that top 6 in this draft?
Top 7, I think could be in consideration. I heard he had a tremendous workout for the Chicago Bulls. Like you said, he's really what you're looking for in today's game. Reminds me a little bit of a cross between Al-Farouq Aminu and Pascal Siakam. You know, a guy who obviously had a huge NBA Finals run, multi-positional defender, someone I've been evaluating since he was 16 years old, been a huge name in France. So big-time athlete, has really shot the ball well during the pre-draft process.
And how about this guy's turned 18 just 2 days before Christmas, will be the youngest player eligible in this year's draft and didn't start playing basketball until he was 12, so still young in the game. Let's go back to the mention of interim GM, though, Woj. So does that mean that Tommy Shepard will be handling all of the draft, or what does this mean for Washington?
Yeah, short of Washington hiring a new GM by Thursday, Tommy Shepard has been running their front office since Ernie Grunfeld was let go, and he has gone through with the staff and really trying to create more process in Washington to how they go through the draft process. That had been a problem in years past. John Wall is out next season, and there's a tremendous amount of money left on his contract. That hangs over this organization. Everybody in the league has tried to get at Bradley Beal. Yeah. They are not trading him. He's eligible for a 3-year, $111 million extension later in July, and right now I'm told it's the team's intention to offer that up to him and try to keep moving forward with Beal.
All right, we all heard the noise. That means a pick is in. It's the Atlanta Hawks' second pick in the first round. Mike Schmitz, you've got this one.
Well, the Hawks already have one of the budding pick-and-roll passers in the NBA, a guy who could become the best pick-and-roll passer in the NBA, and that's Trae Young. So what does he need? A lob threat. I'm going with Jackson Hayes out of Texas. He's the best finisher in the draft. Football background, has tremendous hands, and led ESPN's top 100 in true shooting percentage ahead of Zion Williamson. Big-time late bloomer. Like I said, football background. Dad was an NFL coach, NFL player. Played only 6 minutes a game as a junior in high school. Here he is as a top 10 pick.
Yeah, Dad played 12 seasons in the NFL as a tight end. Jackson also played football early, but ended up being the Big 12 Freshman of the Year and led the country in true shooting percentage. But walking through the Hawks again, would be their second pick of 3. How many of these do the Hawks plan on holding on to, or are there moves that can be made maybe before the draft happens?
Well, I think if there's one player that they target and move up, they have talked at number 3, number 4, number 5, and sometimes it depends on what happens on draft night, who's still available. There's a lot of contingencies, but they put themselves in great position last year. I mean, think of the early part of last season, how much heat Travis Schlenk, their GM, was taking over the Trae Young, Luka Doncic trade. People immediately declared Atlanta had lost that trade. They were going to regret it. And by the end of the year, Trae Young had made a run to get himself in that Rookie of the Year conversation. They also drafted Kevin Huerter in the first round. They got Jalen Adams from St. Bonaventure on a 2-way contract, who's now a rotation guard for them. They've drafted well. They've got a good young core to go back into another draft with here this year.
Yeah, most certainly fun to watch in downtown Atlanta. All right, the pick is in. Number 11, the Minnesota Timberwolves, and Bobby Marks will be making the pick for this one.
Maria, I'm going to follow the script and take best available in the draft. That's right here, and that's Rui Hachimura from Gonzaga. 6'8", 234 pounds, power forward, can play a little bit of 4 and 5 for a Minnesota team that really only has Dario Saric at the 4, and Saric is now in last year of his contract after being acquired from the Sixers last year. And what I've seen, Hachimura possibly can give you some backup minutes at 5 behind Karl Anthony Towns.
He won the Julius Erving Small Forward of the Year award. Remember, Rui Hachimura, big-time Japanese player, could become the first ever Japanese player to be drafted in the first round of the NBA draft. But let's talk a little bit through Minnesota and the Timberwolves and maybe the needs that you see still on the table for them this season.
Well, certainly point guard is a priority, whether they find a way on draft night, whether it's trade or free agency this summer. Gerson Rosas, their new president of basketball operations, he's going to do things very differently than Daryl Morey. He's a different personality. But one thing that I know he'll bring from Houston is being really creative with deals, exploring everything, and not being afraid to take a risk. And I wouldn't be surprised if that pick isn't in motion somewhere on a bigger deal, because they're going to exhaust every scenario, and it'll be interesting to watch Gerson run through his first draft here.
Yeah, and when you talk about Minnesota, obviously a lot of talk about Karl Anthony Towns and the seasons that he's had there. The pick is in. The Charlotte Hornets. Mike Schmitz, I believe it's your turn to take a pick.
Here I'm going with talent and upside, Maria, and that is Nasir Little from North Carolina. You have Owner Michael Jordan, North Carolina grad Nasir Little, had a bit of an up and down freshman season. He was a guy who was projected in our top 5 coming into the season, had his struggles playing behind Cameron Johnson and Luke May, but he's a freak athlete, big-time measurements. Reminds me a little bit of Jaylen Brown in terms of a highly rated recruit who didn't quite live up to expectations, but still has a chance to turn in an productive NBA career.
Yeah, we had all those expectations because he was the McDonald's game MVP, he was the Jordan Brand Classic MVP, and again, maybe a little bit of a regression at UNC, but still all of that upside and potential. Obviously, every conversation that you have to have about the Charlotte Hornets right now is about Kemba Walker. What are you hearing right now in that space?
Maria, I think Kemba Walker, and he has said this publicly all along, his preference is to stay with the Hornets, but they're going to, number one, probably have to come with a 5th year guaranteed. Only other teams could only offer 4. And where does that number, where does the offer from Charlotte come down? If he gets out into the free agent market, Maria, I think Dallas is a team, that would love to pick him off, put him in a lineup with Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis. They have the ability to sign a max player.
Any chance that he remains in Charlotte? And the Celtics, it's their first of 3 first-round picks?
So knowing that I have the 20th pick and the 22nd pick, I'm going to take a swing here, and I'm going to draft Bol, the most polarizing prospect in the entire draft. He's a top 5 talent, 7'3", 7'7" wingspan, can handle it like a guard, can shoot it on the move, really has qualities that only one other player at that size has, and that's Kristaps Porzingis, but major questions about his durability, his health, 208 pounds, so he's a bit of a wild card, but I'm going to swing for the fences here.
All right, you swung, certainly. Only played 9 games at Oregon, but averaged 30 points per 40 minutes if you were to stat that all out. The Celtics, 1 of 3 first-round picks. What should the aim be for a team that really could have a lot of change coming their way?
Yeah, I think like Atlanta, they don't want to draft 3 players, have 3 rookies on their roster. This is still a team trying to win in the now. Kyrie Irving may very well be leaving, and we reported today Al Horford is going to decline the $30 million option on his contract for next season. But what that will allow the Celtics and Horford to do is to get into July, work on a long-term extension, and let's say hypothetically he does 3 years, $60 million, he gets $20 million a year, saves the Celtics $10 million on their cap this season. That allows them to go out and do some things, have their mid-level exception, get out in free agency, and it gives Horford some long-term security. But both Horford and the Celtics, they want to be together. They have a chance to go and do a deal and have something that works for both of them.
Yeah, and certainly with a Kyrie-less Celtics, it would be important to keep Al Horford. Okay, apparently we have a trade alert. Bobby Marks, you're taking advantage of the one trade that we gave both you and Mike Schmitz. Walk us through it.
Oh, Marie, I'm going to turn back the clock and put myself in this Brooklyn front office, and I am going to trade pick 27 and 31 and a future second, and I'm going to move up to pick number 15 where Detroit is right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick probably one of the biggest players in the draft, and that's Goga Bitadze from Georgia. 7-foot center, huge wingspan. And when I look at this Nets team, especially in the playoffs, a team that lacked height, really only Jared Allen on that roster, it's going to be Bitadze. That's why I'm going to move up 12 slots to pick him.
Oh, I love that you're making moves. Finally, Woj, are you okay with it?
I'm fine with it, but I think there are some Nets fans who would prefer that Bobby Marks not trade any more Nets draft picks.
I mean, as soon as we gave him the opportunity, that's exactly what he goes out and does. All right, let's talk more Nets because obviously they've been in so many conversations with Kyrie talks and just free agency talk, trade talks. What are you hearing, and what could maybe be the most important piece they could be adding in this offseason?
Well, piece is they have the ability to sign 2 max free agents. Their focus, it's Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. And obviously Durant would be coming. If he came with Irving, would not play next year, but you'd be able to sign him to a 4-year deal, have him for 3 years. And if they were able to get both of them, then D'Angelo Russell would become an unrestricted free agent. He's restricted right now. The Nets could match an offer sheet, but they can't keep him if they decide to take on Kyrie Irving. And D'Angelo Russell out in the marketplace, that's a player who may command a max contract somewhere. A lot of teams really interested to see if he becomes free and available.
All right, another pick is in. We've got the 16th overall pick going to the Orlando Magic, and ultimately Mike Schmitz making the decision.
So Orlando needs shooting. Terrence Ross, a free agent. I'm going with one of the best shooters in the draft, Kentucky's Tyler Hero. 6'6", can shoot it on the move, can play pick and roll. There's a lot to like about his game, and when you look at this Magic team, they could use a guy who can shoot it off movement like Hero, and if Markelle Fultz is able to eventually turn the corner, I really like Hero's fit with Fultz long term.
I like it. In SEC play, Tyler Hero hit 40% of his threes. He's got a really quick trigger, averaged 14 points per game for the Wildcats. Orlando, they made the playoffs for the first time since 2012. What do you see them needing moving forward?
Well, certainly point guard is a position of need going forward. They don't know with Markelle Fultz. This is certainly a reclamation project. They didn't have to give up much for him. They're going to take a swing and see if they can help him become closer to the player who was taken first overall. But, Mo Bamba, remember last year's 5th overall pick with the Magic, he was injured, missed a lot of the season. It's almost like a second rookie year for him. He'll be able to get out on the court this summer. And I know Steve Clifford, their coach, wants to see some improvement and see some development with Mo Bamba. Nick Vucevic, who was their best player last year, he's a free agent. They've got to make a decision here about keeping him and trying to run it back with a team that did get into the playoffs. I thought Clifford did as good of a job as any coach in the league with his team last year.
I know, especially with those injuries, 42-40, and again, returned back to the playoff. All right, the Hawks, this is their 3rd first-round pick. Bobby, who are you going with for Atlanta?
Maria, I'm going to go on need right now, and I'm going to kind of go off script. And for Atlanta, I'm looking at their depth, and it's Nickeil Alexander-Walker from Virginia Tech, 6'4", combo guard. Especially where the Hawks are with Trae Young and Kevin Arthur in the backcourt. And if with Walker, he can come off the bench, can play 1 and 2 here. And that's especially if Atlanta keeps this pick. But for right now, Walker is going to be the player I'm going to be picking.
Hey, he's a fun player to watch. Shoots with his right hand, but does everything else basically with his left hand, which is pretty impressive. And remember, the cousin of LA Clippers, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So the Hawks, remember we talked about it, 3 picks in the first round. And remember, one of those was received with the trade a season ago with the Dallas Mavericks. And Nickeil Alexander-Walker will round out those first-round picks, according to our NBA front office, Bobby Marks and Mike Schmitz. The number 18 overall pick goes to the Pacers. The pick is in. Mike, you got it.
I'm going with best player available here with talent, and that guy is Romeo Langford out of Indiana. He was a huge name coming up through high school. I mean, there were 2-hour lines of kids waiting for his autograph when he was a sophomore in high school, just a star at a young age out of Indiana. Didn't have the season he was hoping for with the Hoosiers, suffered a thumb injury in late November that really hampered him, but 6'6", near 7-foot wingspan, 3-level scorer. I'm rolling with the talent here.
Yeah, how about playing 26 games with a torn ligament? And I love the fact that you got the homegrown Indiana kid, maybe with an opportunity to play for the Hoosiers, then play for the Pacers. Let's talk about him. Well, 3 foundational pieces already exist there. The process moving forward for this franchise is what?
Yeah, Victor Oladipo, his rehab has gone even better than they could have expected. There's hope that they could have him back December, January potentially. And they've got $43 million plus in cap space. They want to keep Bojan Bogdanovic, who was a really important part of that team last year. Thaddeus Young at the right price. They'd like to bring him back. And they need a point guard in free agency. And you'll see the Pacers involved with, kind of that veteran point guard who can kind of come in and be a stopgap for them. Ricky Rubio from Utah, I think, is a name to watch with Indiana in free agency to take over that point spot.
Yeah, and remember, they still went 500 with Victor Oladipo on the bench with that injury, fought hard with defense. The number 19 pick goes to the Spurs. It's their first of 2 first-round picks. Bobby, who you taking?
For me, it's going to be Keldon Johnson from Kentucky. And I know San Antonio went wing last year with Lonnie Walker from University of Miami. But I look at Johnson as a player that can play 3 positions, average close to 6 rebounds per game last year. Still a little bit of a development project but for a San Antonio team that has Dejounte Murray and Derek White and Bryn Forbes and certainly Walker, there is going to be time for the Spurs to develop Johnson in the next few years here.
Yeah, Bobby, I covered him a lot at Kentucky. Very confident, athletic. The SEC Rookie of the Year is Keldon Johnson. But let's talk a little bit more about the Spurs. DeJounte Murray, remember ACL tear before the season even started, so he didn't get to play. Obviously, there's a lot of question marks surrounding, okay, DeMar DeRozan, how does he fit? How do you move forward? What is your maybe biggest question mark?
Yeah, well, the Spurs have 2 picks in this first round. They have their own, and of course they have 29, the Raptors pick from the Kawhi Leonard trade. And, they thought last year in San Antonio, DeJounte Murray was on his way to an absolute breakout season when he went down with that knee injury. But you saw the development of Derek White, and Lonnie Walker fought through some injuries too. Spurs have always shown an ability to get players better and to make really smart decisions drafting. But this is an organization that's in transition. LaMarcus Aldridge, is headed into, still a very good player, but headed a little bit closer to his twilight. DeMar DeRozan, certainly an outstanding player. But this is a team that could be back in the playoffs next year. And, having 19 and 29, it is also it might give them the ability to jump up in this draft a few spots if they'd like to target a player and go get somebody higher than 19.
All right, so we got one more pick going to the Spurs at 29. And take a look through 19. We've got our picks on the board, but guess what? 2 more Celtics picks coming your way. We will get down to the nitty-gritty. Who will Bobby and Mike Schmitz take if they were the GMs running the show in Boston?
Thursday at 7, check out the NBA Draft presented by State Farm on ESPN. Find out where all the dominoes will fall as the Zion era begins. We'll bring you the draft from start to finish on ESPN and streaming live on the ESPN app.
Jay Billis is always taking my promos. Not your show, but you'll hear more from him a little bit later, breaking down John Moran and RJ Barrett. Take a look at our mock draft board. We have made our way through to a point where we decided it's time to go lightning round. That's a little bit faster. Bobby Marks, Mike Schmitz, you guys go back to back, and we'll start with you, Mike, with the 20th pick. The Celtics have it.
Well, Kyrie Irving potentially on his way out of town, so I'm going with a point guard in Ty Jerome out of Virginia. He's accomplished. He's a national champion. Doesn't have great length or athleticism, but he's a high IQ, cerebral player who can really defend, make shots, and make every ball screen read.
And Mike, for me at 21, which is Oklahoma City, it's PJ Washington from Kentucky. I look at where the Thunder are right now. Jeremy Grant's at the 4, a position of where they need some shooting. Washington shot 42% from 3 last year. Patrick Patterson has not worked out. Markieff Morris did not work out last year, but it's Washington for me.
And then back to the Celtics, I'm going to go with a guy who could hear his name called in the lottery, and that's Brandon Clark. He doesn't have great length. He's on the older side, but he was one of the most efficient players in the country, the best finisher in all of college basketball. He's a pogo stick athlete, doesn't need the ball to be effective, the best short arm shot blocker I've ever seen.
And Mike, at 23, it's Fiondu Capangeli from Florida State, and I look at him in 2 ways. One, as a backup to Rudy Gobert, and possibly even their starting power forward next year with the non-guaranteed contract of Derek Favors, and a player that can play down low. As you see, can stretch the floor here, but for me, it's Capangeli at 23.
And then for the Sixers, this is a team with Ben Simmons, with Joel Embiid. They need shooting. The best shooter in the draft, North Carolina's Cam Johnson. 6'8", he has tremendous shot preparation. His hands and feet always ready. Shot over 45% from 3 this past season. He's a plug-and-play wing shooter.
And at 25, Portland, it's KZ Okpala from Stanford, 6'7", 210-pound wing. Can play a little bit of 3 and 4. One of the bigger wings out there. I look at Al Farouk Aminu, a free agent, possibly can slide in there. Maurice Harkless is a free agent next year in 2001. But for me, it's Okpala at 25.
Good job, guys, on the lightning round. I want to run it back, though, to the 76ers. Cam Johnson is who Mike Schmitz has going to them with the 24th pick. But they have a lot of decisions to make with their free agents, whether or not they keep and sign them. What are the biggest question marks for the 76ers?
Maria, the cost of keeping their 3 primary free agents, Jimmy Butler, Tobias Harris, and J.J. Redick. Their plan all along, when they made the trades for Butler and for Harris, was to re-sign them. It's going to come at a significant cost, especially Tobias Harris. They gave up essentially 3 first-round picks for him, 2 future and last year's first-round pick, Landry Shamet. That's the focus for this team in the offseason, is to keep that core together and try to compete with Toronto, Milwaukee. Boston again is a contender in the East.
All right, so from one team in the East that has a lot of decisions to make in free agency to another, let's talk the Boston Celtics with Bobby Marks and a breakdown of that current roster.
Here's your Boston Celtics roster after Al Horford and Kyrie Irving elected to opt out of their contract. Aaron Baines at the center, now Marcus Smart at the lead guard. And here's why this summer, along with the Thursday night draft, is so important. the future of Kyrie Irving electing to stay in Boston or sign with a new team, what this roster could look like without Irving on the team, and the other free agents, Al Horford, Terry Rozier, and Marcus Morris, and why the draft is so important for Boston. 3 picks in the first round this year, a first-round pick next year along with the Grizzlies' first-round pick. And when we look at the 3 players that the Celtics are targeting, at 14, Bol Bol from Oregon, Ty Jerome as that guard insurance, and Brandon Clark as a possible replacement for Marcus Morris. All 3 players would give the Celtics insurance if they lose their key free agents.
All right, good work, Bobby, and also good work on the draft board because we've made... Well, you won't need a mock draft Thursday night because the real one's coming your way at 7 Eastern. You can also stream it live on the ESPN app. Find out who will be pick number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way down to 30 in that first round. All right, take a look at our draft board. Take a picture of it, and let's just compare it, by the time the actual draft happens and see how Bobby Marks and Mike Schmitz did. They put in the work, they put in the effort, and we'll see how things unfold ultimately on Thursday. Woj, of course, you always have the last say. What would you say was your favorite pick of our mock draft?
Well, Maria, I can't believe our 2 GMs let DeAndre Hunter slip all the way to 7.
I thought you would say
Best defender in this draft, coming from the national championship, Virginia Cavaliers. That's an easy one.
Yeah, he was the ACC Defensive Player of the Year, saved his best for last, a career-high 27 points. We got to get better GMs here, I think, Woj, or at least have them consult us when they're making their picks next time. That's all we have today for our NBA mock draft special. And remember, the real draft is coming your way, 7 Eastern on Thursday. We'll find out how our